I never would have thought a Tootsie Pop would change my life. A little over a decade ago, I had moved from Colorado to Alaska after a few rough and tumble years since college. One summer weekend, my sister and I decided to take an impromptu camping trip to Denali National Park. Now, we've always had a road trip tradition of stockpiling gas station junk food, and one item that cannot be left off the list are Tootsie Pops. So we're driving up the park's highway to arguably one of the most beautiful and pristine wilderness areas in North America. As I finish my Tootsie Pop, I crack the window and let the stick fly. Beau Ryan! Yeah, the middle name. I was terrified. I knew I'd done something terribly wrong, but I honestly had no clue what. My sister had slammed on the brakes, and as we sat in the middle of the highway, she proceeded to tell me, she was yelling at me, that I shouldn't litter in Alaska or anywhere for that matter. Even though it's embarrassing to now admit this notion was foreign to me, it was just a sucker stick, right? As I sat there in guilty silence, I stared long and hard at myself in the passenger side mirror. But then my focus slowly started to shift to the beauty of the Chugach Range passing by. Then back to me in the mirror. And then to the fields full of blooming fireweed, painting the landscape pink and purple. Back to me in the mirror. And then to the streams, lined by willows, chock full of salmon that time of year. Back to me in the mirror. And then to the majesty of the tallest peak in North America, Denali, rising above the clouds that lie ahead. My gaze finally settled in on that all too familiar warning at the bottom of the mirror. We've all seen it. Objects in mirror appear closer than they are. And that's when it hit me. The objects in the mirror, my environment, our environment, were anything but close to me. In fact, I had become completely disconnected. You see, that sucker stick portrayed a perfect metaphor for how I was living my life. Here I was in the last frontier, true unencumbered wilderness, full of clean air, clean water, and abundant wildlife, and I was deciding to put junk into my body as well as into the environment. As I stared into the mirror that day, it was the first time I thought of this term, environmental reflection. Now nearly all of my days are filled with that term. Pretty influential Tootsie Pop, huh? This idea isn't new, it was just new to me. Human and environment interaction has been studied by scientists and theorists for at least the last century or more, birthing numerous ideas, one of which has been deemed the great global syndemic. This syndemic, or synergistic epidemic, science talk, is the combination of epidemics of obesity, undernutrition, and climate change, and how they all interact with one another. It's proposed that this syndemic is the greatest single threat currently facing humankind, and I would agree. When you look at the data, it's impossible not to notice the indelible and mostly negative impact that humans have had on our health, as well as the environment in just the last 50 years. Did you know that 25% of the global population is now clinically obese? 9% has been diagnosed with diabetes. And in the US alone, opioids are pegged to kill more people than car accidents this year. While our health has declined, the planet has fallen ill as well. Ocean levels and temperatures continue to rise, weather becomes more and more extreme, and we've officially moved beyond the threshold of the sixth mass extinction, with over 50% of the Earth's animal species going extinct since just 1970. It's not as if we're all oblivious to these issues, but it's almost as if we lie in wait. Perhaps waiting for technology to save us, or a great mind to think of some master solution. Or maybe we believe that the Earth simply cannot be undone by the lowly humans living upon it. While all of these statistics are shockingly true, it is still up to debate to what extent the role humans have played. But what we can confidently deduct is that our disconnect from nature has fallen entirely in step with the degradation of both human and environmental health. I think Kentucky essayist and farmer Wendell Berry said it best. Though we have caused the earth to be seriously diseased, it is not yet without health. This brings me back to that idea of environmental reflection. When you look in the mirror of your life, what do you see? Do you see an environment that fosters health and well-being, or one that is no longer even supportive of survival? Our personal environments are made up of where we live, what we eat, how we move, who we surround ourselves with, and maybe most importantly, how we think. These are the things that have changed the most in the last few decades, and therefore may be mostly to blame for both health and environmental scenarios we currently face. I mean, we used to grow our own food and hunt for the rest. Now we're lucky if we hunt for a bargain in the supermarket. We used to live in and among nature. Now we lose over 1% of the Earth's forests to suburbanization each year. With the rates of things like anxiety, depression, and suicide sadly skyrocketing year over year, it's hard not to notice a shift in our overall thinking and mindset that is largely influenced by our comparison and consumption-based culture. Now, I do realize when it comes to complex matters like these, information and education are just tiny pieces of the puzzle. And stirring up enough political inertia to create measurable change can seem daunting, if not, well, downright impossible. So the question becomes, how do we move the needle on complex issues like these? It's been almost 12 years since that trip to Denali, and I often think back about how much my life has changed since the infamous Tootsie Pop incident. That seemingly small event shifted my thinking and inspired me to dedicate my life to both human and environmental health. I became a trail runner, a reinvigorated hunter and angler, an entrepreneur, a conservationist, a husband, and ultimately a healthcare practitioner. My reflection changed so much that looking back, I barely recognize the person I used to be. Your reflection, or more precisely, your environmental reflection, is more than just the face staring back at you. It's the sum of how you interact with nature, with wildlife, with others, and really with yourself. It's a representation of how we live our life. And this fundamentally determines the world that we create. In other words, our reality. You know, humans have been able to thrive on Earth for thousands of years for one reason and one reason alone. It's our uncanny ability to adapt. We've adapted to the extent that we are the only species that can truly create our own reality. If we can think it, we can do it. Should be on a t-shirt. But this is what makes us human, and also unique amongst the rest of the flora and fauna we share this world with. In fact, we are not a product of our environment as we've long been told, but instead we've had to become the creators, the curators, and the protectors of our environment. But I think it is this ability, and at the same time a great responsibility, to so readily transform ourselves and the world around us in such profound ways that should give us both solace and inspiration during a time when we face so many perilous issues. Objects in mirror may appear closer than they are. That familiar warning was my catalyst to change. And just as change doesn't occur in a century or a decade or even a year, change actually happens today. Change happens with every thought and decision we make. The decision to use the body that was given to you to interact fully and positively with your environment, to make a choice, to get outside, to exercise, to build meaningful relationships, to foster a healthy mental attitude, and to simply just reconnect. Human health and the health of the planet always have been and always will be inextricably bound. I would go so far as to say that human health is environmental health. And I think the change we've all been waiting for begins with changing your own reflection or changing your own reality. Now, I don't know what your Tootsie Pop incident will be, but what I can assure you is that new reflection is much closer than you might think. Thank you.